They're going to share in them a love for God first that then gets manifested into love for each other as they hold with open hand a resource, and all of a sudden within our covenant community God's doing something that neither one of the churches could do by themselves. So Luke Hall's from Faith in Lincoln City, and Tom is from Silverton, so welcome them, and then let's hear your story.
Thanks, Sheriff. Well, again, my name is Luke Hall. I'm actually the youth pastor there at Faith Baptist Lincoln City. We're just a couple hours down the coast here, and our pastor, Pastor Brian, talked to Jared about kind of sharing this story as we went through the process of a building project, and you know, the challenges that come with that. There are too many to name, but especially this morning, just the financial side of that. And Pastor Brian told Jared he'd be more than happy to share about this, and then he went to Israel. So I'm here instead, but I'm going to make sure that he notices that here in this program it says that I'm a featured speaker at the CB Annual Enrichment Conference. That's going to be highlighted when he gets back and put right in the middle of his desk. Featured speaker, what's up? I just want to share a brief little bit of history of our church, I guess. I'm kind of new to the scene. I've been a part of Faith Baptist in Lincoln City for about 6 years now. I'm going on my 6th year. And I came to a church that was healthy, that was thriving, but I think 12 years ago that wasn't the case. We were a church in crisis. We'd had a few leadership problems where things had really kind of fallen apart from the pastorate, worship leaders, things like that. And we found ourselves in a place where things just weren't healthy. They weren't looking right. Dave Setti and Mark Hafner helped us out with that. They sent Pastor Bard Marshall our way, and Pastor Bard came in. He was supposedly retired, and as a retired guy, he did a whole lot of work. Did a great job. Brought in Pastor Brian, our lead pastor, and that transition was kind of a neat thing a few years ago too, as Pastor Brian took over the lead pastor reins, and Pastor Bard moved on to the associate role. I joked with Pastor Bard that he was the third guy on the totem pole at one point. I think maybe I passed him up at the very end. I don't know. But we weren't a healthy church. We weren't in a great place. But God has truly blessed our church. He's truly blessed the work that's being done in Lincoln City. And it's been a privilege just to be a part of it. I feel like in a lot of ways, I'm just kind of the dumb kid that gets to sit there and just soak it in and see the incredible things that God is doing through His saints. And we've watched our church grow. We've gone through the relational elders process here within the last year and a half, and that's been a blessing to us. And as we grew, we started to outgrow our building. Back in the 90s, a church building project was kind of on the radar as Faith Baptist was growing at that time. And then things kind of fell apart, and we found ourselves in a different place. But then again, about 5 or 6 years ago, more than that, 7 or 8 years ago, we again started to grow. God was really blessing our congregation with new growth, with new converts, with baptisms, and we just started to outgrow the building. We moved on to 2 services. We met Sunday school classes all over the place. When I originally came as the youth pastor 5.5 years ago, I remember coming into this meeting as I visited here for the first time and heard big talk of the new building that was going to happen, looked at these blueprints, and I was excited and pumped up for it, and thinking, man, this is going to be a great facility, and I can't wait to have my youth run all over the place and make a mess. And I had that fall, I had the opportunity to kind of do a harvest party thing, and we had an old bus barn. And while I was cleaning it out, I found like a scale model of a church building project that never happened. And at that time, I thought, man, this isn't real. This isn't going to take place. Here's an old model from 20 years ago, and this building project will never come to pass. I'm glad to say that I was wrong. We ended up bringing in a capital campaign fundraiser, and we raised money as a church. We did the pledges, and ended up raising about $1 million in 2 years. The project was for $2.1 million. And just a neat thing. I mean, we watched most of those pledges come in within the first 2 years, and reached more than 90% of our goal within that time for what was originally slated for 3 years. So we're still working on it. We're still working on that that capital campaign. It's not done yet. I want to share with you guys from 2 Corinthians chapter 5:14, because it has everything to do with our core values here, with the value of story of great commandment love, and it also was our capital campaign fundraising kind of theme verse, and that's 2 Corinthians 5:14 says this: "For the love of Christ controls us, having concluded this, that one died for all, and therefore all died. And he died for all, so that they who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who died and rose again on their behalf." We kind of kept going back to this catchphrase. You know, why are we building this building? It's not just about the fact that the youth are meeting in the pastor's office and we're cramped into a small space. It's not just about the fact that we're moved on to 2 services and we're outgrowing our sanctuary. And we got to the point where on a Sunday like Easter, I mean, people are out in the foyer. It's more about the fact that Christ's love compels us to reach our community. Lincoln City is kind of Seaside's ugly stepsister. We're very similar, and as you heard Pastor Glenn kind of share about the demographics of the Oregon coast and of Seaside and the divorce rate, those are realities that we face as well. We wish we were Seaside. Lincoln City really does. If you've ever been down there, we wish we were the resort town. We wish that we had as much of the tourist attraction and things like that. We're kind of a wannabe. And it's a rough place. It's a dark place. It's a place where a lot of churches have struggled, and there are a lot of lost people. I have the opportunity to serve as the high school wrestling coach. And that was kind of an accidental thing. You know, God knew what he was doing, but I didn't. And I found myself in that place, and it's just a neat inroad to that community, and to being able to kind of feel the pulse very directly of what Lincoln City feels like. As I'm inside of that school almost every day, meeting with those kids, and getting to hear their stories, getting to be a part of their life, getting to talk to them about Jesus Christ as a wrestling coach. In that whole process of the building project and raising the money, we didn't want to lose sight of the fact that it's Christ's love that compels us. We didn't want that just to be something that was lip service. It's easy to kind of pick a theme verse and quote it over and over again and make the banners and have the catchphrase on there. But we wanted it to be a reality that this was not about having a nicer facility with more bathroom stalls. We wanted it to be about reaching our community and reaching the lost. And so that's really kind of the aim that we built it for. We did the multi-purpose gymnatorium, sanctinasium, as we call it. And in fact, we even came up here to North Coast and looked at theirs just to kind of get an idea of what we were looking to build and copy their plans. Because I told you, we're wannabe Seaside. So that was the process. That's where we were. We're raising that money. We came up, like I said, with about $1 million that was given within those first couple of years. We got a few individual loans in order to help supply closer toward that $2.1 million total. But we were still coming up short. And kind of the place that we were is we knew that we needed some more money in order to move in. We need some more funds in order to finish the project and get moved in there. And that's where Tom Smith comes into play, and his church, First Baptist in Silverton. And we got to know Tom through the Pastor's Prayer Summits and through our associational meeting. We're part of the Central Willamette North Sector 4, Quadrant 3, whatever it is, association, and I don't know what it is, but Central Willamette North. And we got to know Tom through that process, and actually, you know, I just had a neat opportunity to talk to Tom at the Pastor's Prayer Summit. As the youth pastor, I'm always kind of the sidekick, and I got the opportunity at the Pastor's Prayer Summit. We were in the bunkhouse and learned a little bit about Tom's history as a missionary to Kenya, and no lie, the guy brought me to tears that night just telling stories, and you'll have to ask him about those. And we did a pulpit exchange later on where Brian actually went to Silverton and preached there, and Tom came to Lincoln City. So in a lot of ways, we feel like Pastor Tom is one of ours. He's part of the Lincoln City family, whether he wants to be or not. And we appreciate him. So I'm going to let Tom kind of pick it up from there because he knows more about the process of how his church kicked in and helped us out.
I really wanted to be a part of the Seaside family. As Pastor Brian would talk and share prayer requests and stuff, it came clear, just the story that he said, that they were in a building program, had done a capital campaign. Their church had been in a process before and it hadn't worked. Now they were coming back to that. And as we share as churches in our gathering, a monthly gathering that Russ leads us in, it was almost kind of like deja vu. I mean, we had done that. When I came to the church in 2002, they had just finished a capital campaign. And they were on target to build a building, and what happened, even after they raised the money, over $500,000, from 2002, that money had sat in CDs and investments, whatever, because the church transitioned downward after that time. They had gone from 2 services back to 1. There had been some changes in the overall vision, some uncertainty, what we should be doing in our community. Is it really the time to build or not? And so from 2002, that money sat. I came to the church in 2008, July of 2008. When I got there, it was like, man, this is pretty cool. The church hadn't had a pastor for 3 years. They had over $200,000 that was in just a checking account balance that they just carried year to year. And they had nearly $600,000 in a building account. And I was like, man, this is so great because I love giving away other people's stuff. You know, and that's the essence of gospel ministry. It's not our stuff. I didn't make up the story. I didn't invent it. It's not my plot. None of that originated with me. I just get to give it away and say, you should hear this guy's story. It's Jesus. So that works well with money too. And so as I thought about giving away other people's money, it was easier for me because I didn't contribute the money. And I understand that people feel a lot differently when they're actually the ones who gave the money. It came to light in our Central Willamette Association meetings that another one of our churches in the area had a building program, had a fundraising, and had money that they hadn't built with, which was even more than we had. And it'd be interesting to know how many of our scenarios in churches that we've moved from place to place in the strategy, in the leading that God's given us, and we have money that God has supplied that has never been actually deployed in His service as it was originally gathered. So I started thinking about giving money away. In one of the earliest contacts I had, Mark and his motorcycle buddies, they rode up to our church and they were praying, and I was doing this kind of grouchy thing about, man, I know how to do ministry in Kenya when there's not very much. I know ministry in poverty, but I didn't really know the principles of doing ministry in plenty. And as I started talking about giving money away, Mark just dropped a comment. He probably even forgets this, but he says, you know, Tom, I've known a lot of churches that have done really hasty and foolish things when they had excess budgets. And it was like, okay, well, I guess there are probably cooler heads that should prevail and should be brought into this process. So as we started hearing about Lincoln City's process, I thought, well, maybe there's an opportunity for us to use money that we raised for our building to actually be deployed still for a building, but not for ours. I talked with Scott Reevely up in Wilsonville. They had a church plant, and he was considering what they could do and how they could raise some money. And I said, we got money. Maybe we can help you guys. We didn't end up doing that, but just the offer, just saying that God had given us resources that we would consider using to help another church, he went away greatly encouraged by that, with a new sense of faith and the resources that God had for what their church was planning may already be in the hands of others of God's church that would come alongside and help them. Well, the Wilsonville thing didn't work out, but we kept meeting on this Tuesday meeting and talking about it. And as Brian got into their capital campaign and talked more, I said, well, hey, maybe we should be a part of that. which just sounded like a good idea, but it didn't really sound like reality because, again, there was a lot of people invested. There was a lot of sacrifice. The same sort of things with verses and dinners and pledges, and people had given money to a vision that they thought was going to be theirs. That it just happens besides the gray hair, the other stuff happens too. They'd given money to this vision that hadn't happened. And they still had a vested interest. They still were wondering, what does God have for us in that? So I started talking with Brian. They said, well, that'd be cool if you gave us money, you know. They were all for it. But we weren't real sure how that was going to happen. So we started talking, and after the pulpit exchange that we had in August of 2011, I wanted Brian to come up and preach in Silverton. I went down there. I wanted them to see what a young guy looked like, sounded like in the pulpit. And so we had done some things. Well, in spring of 2012, it started to look a little more serious. We had a combined elder and deacon meeting. Our two boards were going to meet, and that was on the agenda. Well, I called Brian, and I was really hoping that he could come and make this presentation in person, but he seems to have this habit of not showing up. So he was going to be busy, and I'm like, Brian, this is significant. We finally got these boards together. We've been looking at this for a while. We're finally thinking we could make a go of this. We could actually do a deal. And he said, you know, I'm just swamped. I'm up to here with everything going on, and I can't make the trip. It was some day that he already had something scheduled. I'm like, change your schedule. It's going to happen. Well, it wasn't going to happen for them, and I was out in the property behind our house, behind our church, walking my dog. And if I was Pentecostal, I would say, God told me. We kind of say, I thought and the Lord led me. However it worked out, I got a hold of Brian on the phone, and I said, Brian, if you can't come, you need to do a video. And he said, well, I can't do a video. He says, but I got Luke who can do a lot more than he just said. And he goes, and I'll have Luke shoot this video. So I don't know how long it took you guys to do that, half a day or so. They put together this video. It had Brian talking in their unfinished church. They talked about the needs in Lincoln City. They talked about the opportunities before them to build and the money they needed. It was great. So we sat up, you know, in our high-tech church. We got the computer and the projector, and then we've got a little screen set at the end of the room on this folding table, just like you have in your, you know, church, in this little room where we're meeting. And we played it, and the guys loved it. It was a $100,000 video, and it was great. But they still had all the questions. Questions like, what are we going to say to people who gave the money? How are we going to present this to the church that we're considering giving $100,000 of our money for our building to another church for their building? Well, it wasn't going to be a gift, so that made it go down a little bit easier, but it was going to be an extended loan, and it was going to tie up our money. They were looking at a 5-year period. So the deacon who wrote this little summary for me, he says, I do think that it was a bit unprecedented, meaning they'd never done it before, they never even thought about it before, and therefore not something we were immediately comfortable doing. There was discussion about legal aspects, anticipated response, concerns about the stewardship of the contributions given by others, etc. All the same concerns your churches would have. The realization that it was God's money entrusted to us to steward and use for a future ministry facility opened our hearts. The practical side was that it was an attractive way to invest our monies in a market of very poor CD returns. At that time, we had over $400,000 was coming to us in CDs that needed to be reinvested. So they were looking at laddering those out in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5-year increments. So in a way, we put it to immediate use for our sister church facility, and at the same time for our church's benefit, making a good return for the funds we will use in our own facility in the future. On a spiritual side, there's a double benefit for two churches ministry where there was almost none before. Then he writes, I stand by my comments in the email that I wrote to the men the following day. So what this is this is a guy who was led by leaders into his own leadership stride. I mean, the guy's some of this thing. He's hitting the mark now. So I didn't get much sleep last night either. So here's what he writes, some personal thoughts. I feel very good about this motion, and I have to admit I was initially a skeptic. Our church is blessed with a large 10 and 12 year idle building fund. We have an opportunity to use this building fund towards a new sanctuary in Lincoln City, while we collect a very attractive interest and have full anticipation of getting all the money returned in time for our own future building. It is simply an alternative choice of investment, a government-insured 1.5% interest CD from a mega bank in San Francisco versus a 4% interest loan to a sister church undergoing rapid growth and trying to catch a window of great ministry opportunity seen in Lincoln City, Oregon. Our motives are pure and with faith. Let us be confident, joyful, and feel really good about this move. Now, the PS to what he wrote. He said, another point in the minutes is that 4 men in our church each committed $10,000 from personal assets if there was a default on the loan. Now, if there's a reason to cry for me, is because as I read this, I forgot that I was one of those 4 people. I read this to my wife and I said, honey, we committed $10,000. She's like, wait, what? But a part of the leading in that meeting was being able to say, I'm not only bringing forth this idea, but I'm willing to be one of those who will say, I don't have $10,000, so you guys better thrive in ministry there. But I just want to say, we're going to do that, and the chairman of our elder board, chairman of the deacon board, and another deacon, 4 of us, said, we think this is a good enough investment for the kingdom that we want to see it happen. So we were able to go down and to visit there, be at the dedication, see that. You know, in my mind, the scenario would have been we would have had about 50 of our people doing the, woohoo in the background during it. They didn't get to go, but they do go down there. They visit when they're there. They pray for your church. There's some ties there that wouldn't have been there. And I think it is building some of that love that we hope to see, that God who supplies seed for who? The sower. God who supplies seed for the sower and bread. I wrote it down, it'll be easier to. And bread for food will supply and multiply your seed and increase the harvest of righteousness. So he doesn't supply seed just to sit, but he supplies seed for the sower. And so that's a great opportunity, and we're grateful for that.
We had a slide for you guys. But just to kind of see it, there's some cool pictures. If you just want to kind of shoot through there, this is Pastor Tom meeting with a couple of our building finance committee and a couple of his guys here. So just go ahead and scroll through that. First service is just last month. That's Pastor Brian there on the right. That's all you'll see of him this year. So once again, just a neat opportunity to see Silverton investing in us. And it's a real investment. And seeing the kingdom and the capital C church work together. And I get to be on the sideline watching. So thanks.